It's that time again to open up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag. Is Bill Belichick doing something very interesting? Maybe playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers at quarterback. And Jonathan Taylor, where should he rank in the NFL? Some new signings as well. Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where most of the questions are coming from today on Twitter. You can also drop a question anytime you want on the YouTube channel. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Big shout out to all the everydayers that already are. Today's episode of P&W is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On and the NFL. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Where to start? Let's start with the news of the day as rosters start to settle around the NFL. And we've got a new contract for Hockenson.
I think this is kind of a foregone conclusion. There was a little bit of buzz about it. Is this going to get done? Is it not? When you trade for a guy and use him as much as they did, I mean, this is kind of a fantasy nugget, but his production, his targets, his usage in every way spiked dramatically with the Vikings. And they've really been looking for, and, obviously they traded for him before drafting Jordan Addison. They were really, really in the market for some semblance of a number 2 receiver. I mean, Jefferson demands such attention. I think you and I had this conversation with the Dolphins the other day that, the Dolphins are missing their Kittle. Well, they kind of got their Kittle now in Minnesota, and Addison should be eased into things with a lot of single coverage as well. So they need to run the ball better, but Hockenson helps in that regard too. And they'll play a lot of probably 12 personnel with a big, heavy tight end, Josh Oliver, and Hockenson will be the move guy. And I like where they're at. I mean, the middle of their interior, their line worries me a little, but I think it's a good offense in Minnesota.
After trading for Hockenson, he's going to the last year of his contract. As a first rounder, he had that 5th-year option year that was upcoming for Hockenson. So now he gets a new contract, one of the highest paid, not the highest paid tight end in the NFL, with his 4-year, $19 million contract, it looks like, including $12 million plus in signing bonuses, so a little bit lower than what the initial dollars were when you see it thrown out there. So that's actually, man, with the initial one of the highest paid tight ends in the NFL, I guess that's still true, but he's still not even halfway there to the top guys with around $5 million per year.
Yeah, I'd say that's the first I heard the terms. I wonder if they're wrong. I mean, that sounds like it. Here's what I'm okay. I'm serious.
I've seen 4 years, $68 million.
That's what I'm seeing. Okay, that makes more sense.
I see as well. This is so that was before the extension. So I see what's going on here. So yeah. The contract he was under before the extension was $5 million per year. This is worded really screwy. And the official contract number is not updated. So yeah, 4 years, 68. So nearly 70 million total contract for Hockenson now.
Okay, that adds up. I mean, he's going to be near the top of the league. He's one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends in football right now. I think he's ascending. Former first-round pick that's starting to hit his stride as well, in terms of his career path. We know tight ends take a little while.
And actually, that per year puts him number 1. Hockenson.
Is it number 1?
Yeah, 17 or on a per year. I don't know about total dollars, but per year, that is 17.1 million. That is ahead of Waller, that was 17 million. Kittle's 15. Travis Kelce 14.31 million per year.
Okay, I mean Kelce's the best bargain in the world.
Yeah, all these tight ends are bargains when you compare them to wide receivers.
They really are. I mean, even Hockenson, who isn't nearly the threat that Justin Jefferson is on his team, but he presents a lot of problems and is a great compliment. And at that price, even though it is high by tight end numbers, you're going to get all that production out of him, no doubt.
It's just this is where we talked about the holdouts with Chris Jones and Nick Bosa. This is where it gets dicey because I don't think Hockenson belongs in the tier of those guys necessarily, but whoever's up next gets the most money. And
the way it goes, yeah.
They want to go over the top of Aaron Donald money. And the teams I don't think want to do that. So that's where those contracts start to get very difficult because it's almost too easy this day and age, right? They used to be more difficult negotiations. Now it's like, okay, who's up next? You get the most. Good job.
You get the most. Well, what that tells me, two things I want to talk about. One is going backwards to the Chris Jones conversation. What if Kelsey wanted to be a jagoff and was like, hey, I want 30? I don't want to be the fifth highest paid tight end. How about
here's this question. When are tight ends going to do what running backs are doing right now and be like, wait a second, we deserve not only do we deserve wide receiver money, we deserve more because we block too.
National Tight End Day, they might need to bring a few agents too and have a little chat, when they party it up. Yeah. But back to your point about how it used to be harder. Now it's just who's next. What that tells me is the league is healthier than ever, and the revenue streams coming into the NFL are healthier than ever, because for the most part, owners aren't batting an eye of, okay, TJ, you're not Gronkowski, but we'll make you the highest paid tight end, give or take. And then next time when, I don't know, Kyle Pitts comes up or whoever, oh, it's your turn. Okay. Because we got a ton of money coming in. We'll spread it around. We'll be just fine.
And the thing that's different about running backs is the money's growing for tight ends and it's not for running backs.
That's their shelf life.
Here's what's interesting though, too, about why the tight end position is not growing or they're not making the money that wide receivers are, because these tight ends aren't hitting the market.
No, right.
All of these deals, like Hockenson was traded for, there was a trade with Waller, but neither one of them was free agents. Kittle was signed with his own team. Kelsey signed with his own team. These top tight ends aren't hitting the free agent market, so the teams know how valuable they are, and they look at what the top tight ends are getting, and they're like, that's okay. I'd rather pay a top tight end than top wide receiver. And the wide receivers are hitting the markets, and there's more of them, and they're getting all this crazy money.
Interesting. Yeah, because even like, as you mentioned, Waller and Hockenson were traded, so that's different than hitting the open market. I guess the next name that'll be kind of interesting is, what about when Dallas Goedert comes up? Because they have a very expensive quarterback. I'm sure they want to keep Smith and Brown. So I would think he's next in the market of maybe, pushing the envelope a little bit.
And he wasn't a first round guy, so he's already done one contract, right?
That's a good question. I just pulling that out of left field, to be honest with you.
He still has a pretty decent payday, but it's not a huge payday, but he's already on to his second contract.
I'm actually pulling it up. Yeah, you're right. He signed a 4-year 57, and that was just recently, so yeah, they got him locked up at a pretty good number.
Okay, so
right now he's a 14 million base salary in 24 and 25. Right now, he's very low cap hit because of the deal he recently signed. So they're in good shape with him.
5 or 6 top tight end money.
Yeah. So that's a nice. It looks better every day.
Well, that ties into one of our listener questions here from Joey Bag of Donuts. We appreciate Joey Bag of Donuts. He's a common frequenter of the mailbag episodes, and he says if a tight end doesn't do tight end things, like block in parentheses, then shouldn't that tight end be designated as a wide receiver? Well, teams don't want that because they don't want to have to pay him like a wide receiver.
Well, that's going to be their argument. And this goes back to Jimmy Graham, when he was franchised with the Saints. It seems like a million years ago, but it's probably 3 or 4 years ago. And he said, hey, why are you calling me a tight end? I don't line up in line or block anybody. And basically they just said, well, if I pull your football card out of a pack, it says TE on it. Then you walk in the tight end meeting room every day. So you're a tight end, son. So we're going to pay you 60% of what the wide receiver would. And I always found it really interesting too. Like, this has kind of gone away, but like in the 3-4 versus 4-3 world, TJ Watt is, quote, a linebacker, but Myles Garrett is a defensive end. Like, that's so dumb. They're the same guy. You know what I mean?
Same position. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Next, we got to talk about now that we know, for the most part, what the future might hold for Jonathan Taylor, that he's out for 4 weeks.
Mhm.
Where do you rank him among fantasy
Yeah, I need help.
players? And an interesting quarterback question with the new quarterback rules, emergency quarterbacks, teams keeping 3 quarterbacks, or like the Patriots keeping 1 quarterback next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. A special deal right now for new customers at FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $5 or can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Doesn't matter if that first $5 bet wins or loses. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So multiple reasons to join FanDuel right now. And just a $5 bet can get you $200 in bonus bets and can get you $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube before this season gets rolling. So make sure you are set up there and have so much fun in so many different ways at FanDuel. Any sport, a million ways to bet on the NFL. Build your own parlays. Love the website. The app is super user-friendly and safe, and you can find spreads and player props and everything else, and spreads all the way through the season right now. Every single week you can bet on. You don't even have to start with week 1 if you don't want to. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Jonathan Taylor. You wanted to talk a little bit about Jonathan Taylor. And
I need help.
In my home league that drafted last weekend, Jonathan Taylor ended up going mid to late second round. And I thought that was a huge bargain. But at that time, I thought, man, that he might end up a Miami Dolphin. But instead, instead, since then, what has happened is he's gone on the PUP list and has not been traded.
So, right. I mean, now many of us, I have my 2 biggest leagues are drafting this weekend, and I've been tweaking my spreadsheet hourly. I mean, this guy should be 17. He should be 18. And when it comes down to it, I mean, you only play 16 fantasy games, and a quarter of them, he's not even going to be there. I kind of think there's a chance he never plays again for the Colts. Even week 5, if it's Indy, Miami, or whatever, he probably is brought along slow. That's a pretty large portion of my fantasy year. And I'll be honest, the older I've gotten, the less likely I am to stash a suspended or injured player, because you sit there for I'm not going to take Jameson Williams. I mean, Taylor's different. I mean, Kamara's different, but I'm not stashing a guy hoping that when he comes back from suspension, he's great. So ESPN always plays the name game, like Jonathan Taylor or player X. I want to play the name game with you, knowing all the things we know now. Would you take Taylor in fantasy or player X?
I like it.
Okay. Some of these are going to be hard because I'm not sure what to do with Breece Hall. Jonathan Taylor or Breece Hall? Been good news on Hall lately, but Cook's in the mix.
Breece Hall.
Me too.
You get I at least know I'm getting fantasy points from Breece Hall.
That's the thing. I'm aiming kind of high. To be honest, I have him noticeably below Breece Hall.
Here's what I would. So this is probably the best way to put it for me with how I value Jonathan Taylor's in a fantasy format is I will expect to get him for the end of the season. So not only do I know I'm not going to get 4 weeks out of him, he might hold out to where that 8-week mark where he can accrue a season finally. I think it's 8 weeks, right? It's basically the same as the trade deadline. So I'm going to expect that I only get Jonathan Taylor post trade deadline.
And then he might, quote, get a hammy in week 10 and never play again.
And it might be a different team. And then there's an acclimation process and you really only get a couple of really good weeks, but he's there for your. So I will expect to get him. I will expect to have a low tread top running back for the fantasy playoffs. So it does have value.
It does.
I'm going to, let's say
clogs your roster in the meantime
for 8 weeks rather than being on the PUP for 4 is how I would.
Okay. And he's great or has been great when he's out there, but that's just especially shallow leagues. You're just sitting there eating them up and people are picking up guys left and right and you can't. All right, here's some other names. Alexander Madison. Looks like the clear number one on a pretty good Viking offense, but not as good a player.
Jonathan Taylor. I'm
Okay.
Madison's way too high. I don't know why people are treating him like he's a true one. He's gonna get his touches will get eaten into, I think, by Ty Chandler or somebody else on the roster. And I don't think he's gonna be the focal point of the offense. But a nice little player in PPR.
Okay, because maybe he was a bad example because I'm kind of out on him too. I just figured most people seem to look at him as an RB2. I'm drafting Ty Chandler left and right, to be honest with you.
Here's
how
the thing
about it? Okay, good.
So if I'm drafting, I could probably get more trading Taylor, even with him being out for 4 weeks, than I could for Madison. So I'm playing the value game more so than how many fantasy points am I going to get from this guy.
Mm-hmm. A lot of this, though, I look through the perspective of, especially at running backs, fantasy is such a week-to-week game that I'll start Madison week 1, week 2. He doesn't have a high ceiling, though, but at least I'm getting points. Like, I don't even know when I can start Taylor. I mean, it might be week 8, like you said,
Yeah, that's true.
So how about like a bad offense, high-touch guy like Rachaad White, Cam Akers, James Conner?
Taylor.
You're taking Taylor over all those guys. Okay.
I'm trying to either get first place or 12th place in my fantasy league. I don't want sixth place. So Connor, Madison, those
Connor's super low for me.
They don't have a place on my roster. I just those aren't the fantasy points I'm chasing. Give me who's the third player? You mentioned one more.
Akers was the other. Just probably bad offense.
Rachaad White too. So
Rachaad White, right?
We would have seen something if he was going to be a big time guy. We would have seen that already.
I tend to agree. I think all those guys are flexes with little benefits. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Just boring. I want someone else to draft them.
And if you get a really good ADP, and usually can't because they're starting running backs, so they don't end up on my rosters.
Okay. Some of them try to find a higher DeAndre Swift. That's such a muddy backfield, but what if he's catching 6 to 8 balls a game? And at least he can play in week 1.
Oh, I'm going to go Taylor.
Okay. I get it. I mean, you're going to be pretty happy the day he comes back.
Right.
Here's my last one.
You're hoping for week 5.
You're hoping for week 5. You're hoping Miami trades from today.
Yes, like they still figure something out, and he's already been on the pups. That's been done, so that stinks that he can't all of a sudden be like, "Oh, cool, big surprise, he's going to play week 2," But week 5 is good. Like and right now he's still on track to play week 5. You get week 5, Jonathan Taylor. I'm easily taking him over all those.
Over every name we mentioned, probably.
Yeah.
So this is probably his low point because I do think there is a much higher percent than 0% chance that he is on another team before they even kick off Thursday night. You know what I mean? Like in the next week or so.
All of the leagues I'm in and all of the best ball drafts I've done, I don't have Taylor on any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't drafted any of those other players either that you mentioned.
Okay.
None of those guys
are on the wrong guys. All right, last one I got for you, and this one's more apples to apples. Kamara is missing the first 3 games, but he's going to come back to a crowded backfield. He's a little older. Kamara over Taylor?
I go Taylor. Because I think he's higher up once he comes back.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's definitely better. Guys like Dalvin Cook, Mixon, Kamara, I think they might be knocking on Ezekiel Elliott's door. You know what I mean?
Part of it for me is maybe my own ego getting in the way. And I think maybe those other players should be higher and drafted higher than Taylor. But I think that even if it's 8 weeks that you miss Taylor, I think I can scrap together a sleeper value on my roster and end up with more total points than just locking myself into mediocrity. So that's kind of the thought process there. Even though
I'm glad we had this conversation because I had them too low. So because I'm like you, I'm super.
The other thing I would warn you.
Well, I'm like you though. I'm cocky and like I'll figure it out week to week. I'm smarter than those jabronis I went to high school with. You know,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I am all about striking out or hitting a home run too. Like singles and doubles don't do me any good in fantasy. I don't want to come in second.
I'm not trying to finish in 1st or 12th. I'm trying to finish in 1st or 11th. You don't want to be in last place.
Yeah, especially in my son's league, who's 16.
Yeah.
They lock the guy in a dog cage and like smear peanut butter and syrup on him and stuff. I wish I'd have come up with that, but us 51-year-olds, we're not doing that anymore. 50-year-olds, right?
You're usually lucky that all 12 come back every year.
Right. And no one has like heart issues or something.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. You help me out there. Good. I'm going to move him up a smidge.
Okay.
Let's wait for the
Bill Belichick, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, the quarterback situation there. And we've got some other questions, including what is the best wide receiver duo in the NFL? Next. Thank you once again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day. Shout out to all the everydayers. You can subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. So I have a question from, if I can find it, this is from Colt. He says, with cut day past us, not many teams kept 3 quarterbacks on their initial 53-man rosters. Do you think the NFL needs to revisit the idea of the emergency quarterback to incentivize teams to keep the third? For example, bump rosters to 54 with one having to be that third quarterback to incentivize doing it. And I'm going to add on to Colt.
Yeah, I know you have more to take on this.
Because Bill Belichick kept one quarterback. And they ended up, Bailey Zappi and rookie Malik Cunningham ended up clearing waivers and both signed back to the practice squad. So is Bill Belichick just smarter than everybody else? And he realized, you know what this emergency quarterback thing does is it allows me to actually keep another position instead of quarterback, because now I can every week call up Bailey Zappi from the practice squad and I can use him as my emergency quarterback going into the game and to be the same as I had 2 quarterbacks before. And now I can keep an extra offensive lineman on my 53 and I can dress an extra player on my 46-man roster that I couldn't before.
Wow. And I always feel bad doing it, but we often call out Belichick, the coach, is so much smarter than Belichick, the GM, and make it sound like he's the old man yelling at the clouds. You know, like this guy doesn't know anything anymore. And meanwhile, he's on Mount Rushmore and knows everything. Might be right. I mean, if you had a Winston Darnold Trubisky backup, you don't do that. But if you have just a dude that isn't expensive and I can maybe put 3 of them on my practice squad or whatever, you could litter your practice squad with quarterbacks, hoping to find one that way.
You got
no one's going to pick them off there.
Your practice squad if you want to.
Yeah, right. And who's going to steal them this time of year? They're not watching your practices. They don't know who's shining at practice.
Right. And you can block it, right? You still have the rule. So there's the call up and block rule. So essentially Bailey Zappi is the 54th man on his roster because you can block him from being claimed from your practice squad every week and you can call him up every week.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of it from that angle. I think that's pretty smart. Nice work by our listener and nice work by Bill. I mean, again, if you have somebody that the world would pick up, then of course you don't do that. But I thought a lot of teams would keep 3 and, 67 guys started last year, keep 3 and maybe 1 in the practice squad, but maybe you're selling yourself short on game day.
And I do think that maybe in the playoffs we might, and well, here's the thing is it's kind of the 49ers rule, right? And the 49ers did keep 3 quarterbacks. And I wonder if when it gets into the playoffs, teams might think more about that.
Yeah. Like Zappi gets called up as soon as they get in or whatever.
You're going to add a guy that you didn't have all year, though, just to be your emergency quarterback? You're probably already hurting with injuries, so maybe it's even less likely once you get later into the season. I don't know.
Does he call Brian Hoyer or does he have like a Hoyer sitting around at home? Brian, we're going to need you sometime. Keep the bat phone handy. We'll, the playbook. We know you, blah, blah, blah. Please don't sign with anyone else. And we'll give you $500 more grand than we should,
Bill's like, hey, honey, where do we put the Hoyer? She's like, I think in the garage.
It's getting a little dusty. It's been around. Would you throw that thing away? I've been asking you to throw that Hoyer away for 10 years. Get that thing out of here. Right.
I love it. I love that he's trying something different. If this is how it sticks and it looks like this is how it's going to go for the Patriots. And I love it, dude. I find that, utilize the rules. And Bill's always going to look at things differently. And sometimes it's worked and sometimes it looks a little funky. But I love it, man. Thank goodness.
He'll certainly stretch the rules. I mean, I'm not saying he's breaking anything, but I mean, he's going to look for every loophole More power to him. I respect the heck out of him for that.
And it might end up being one of those rules where the league, didn't like something that happened in a marquee game and changes the rules, and then they revisit it and are like, yep, you know what? This rule didn't need to be there, so they undo it later.
Could be. Yeah, maybe they will find out that this, in practicality, wasn't as good as we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Yeah.
Another note, actually, that Chris Greer said the Dolphins and Colts never actually exchanged any offers on Jonathan Taylor. The talks were just exploratory, Greer said. And I don't know if that's him covering his tracks and just kind of, not wanting his own running backs to think that they were trying to replace him. But, the Packers supposedly made a little run there or had some talks, but maybe and the other side of it is apparently Waddle was somebody that in those exploratory talks that they asked for, and clearly they weren't getting that. So I think this was maybe the Colts kind of faking it and being like, yeah, we're going to ask for too much, and this trade's not going to happen.
When you come back, you're like, how about Jalen Waddle? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I took it. Was we want a 1, they come back with a 2 and change or whatever. Here's a package. And then he comes back and be like, well, if you're not going to give us a 1, how about we do Jalen Waddle? What do you think about that? Like, oh, I'm not giving you Jalen Waddle.
Speaking of Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, that brings up a really good
conversation. The number 1 wide receiver duo in the NFL. Ryan asks, I wanted to hear you guys rank the best wide receiver duos for this coming year only. Not fantasy points, just pure talent for 2023. And he names a few of them, Brown and Smith in Philly, Chase and Higgins in Cincinnati, Hill and Waddle, and Ayuk and Samuel in San Francisco, as well as I think he throws in another one here. Lamb and Cooks, maybe Johnson and Pickens, even in Pittsburgh. What do you think? How do you rank?
Really hard.
Duos? I would put Hill, Waddle 1.
I took the Eagles 1 and Miami 2, but I will say Tyreek's number 1 of the group. I think AJ Brown's so good though.
How about this? I think we can tier it out and say that Brown and Smith in Philadelphia, Chase Higgins in Cincinnati, and Hill, Waddle in Miami are their own tier at the top.
They're my top 3 as well. I put them Eagles, Dolphins, Bengals, but we're splitting hairs here. If T. Higgins brings down your score, then we're splitting hairs here. You know what I mean? Then I went Seattle over your Niners.
Philly pair. I like that you have the Philly pair so high, because I think if you polled fans, they would be 3rd after the Cincy and the Miami duos.
I think Devontae Smith's a star.
I think Higgins and Brown are both underrated, to be honest with you. And everyone likes them, but I just think they're underrated from where each one ranks. Agreed.
I don't think the gap between Tyreek and Jamar to AJ Brown is hardly any. You know what I mean? And I might take Smith over Waddle and Higgins. Higgins is last of those 6, which he's awesome.
Right. Yeah. And I think that Tyreek Hill is just what he can do for your offense. He fits everywhere because he can create so much by himself. Whereas Higgins and Chase still need someone to get the ball downfield to him, because that's where they are the best.
Frankly, in a vacuum, the best receiver in the league to me is Justin Jefferson. I think Adams is in the conversation, but I think Tyreek is the one that has the best case to be number 1 besides Jefferson. Especially if you ask like defensive coordinators. Like, I'd still rather play against Devontae Adams than Tyreek Hill. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and when you're playing the Bengals, you'll cover 4 over the top and say, okay, beat us underneath.
Where Hill just changes the whole geometry on the field and angles and all that. So I had 3 more after that. I had Seattle, Niners, Chargers, Bucks. I guess that's not 3, that's 4.
Yep, and I think Seattle, if you moved it to 3, might even be a little
they
higher.
get a bump.
If you're not including tight ends, you start including tight ends, and then or like a 3rd option, then it starts to make other teams with top tight ends and
but just pure receiver duos.
Like Lamb Cooks is good, but I don't think it deserves to be in the conversation with those. Johnson Pickens is fine, but we need to see that huge year 2 breakout from Pickens, and both those guys are so specific in the way that they win that it's hard to rank them over anybody else.
Yeah. Again, if we're tiering it, maybe I do tier 2 is Seattle and the Niners. Just talking about top 2 wideouts.
Yes.
And then Bucks Chargers would be tier 3. But you worry if Evans and Allen are falling off.
And with Seattle, they're really set up to, even if Lockett falls off or, whatever, DK and Jackson Smith and Jigba was going to start to look pretty good for a long time as well.
Yeah. Oh, they're set up really well in terms of 3 different styles of receivers, 3 different ages. I love where they're at with that. Yeah. And it sounds like we're getting some good news on Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, he's already back, I think. I think he's back on the field.
Yes, he actually practiced yesterday, I think. Awesome. Yeah, that's good for him.
Last one here from Michael is Anthony Richardson going into a worse situation than Justin Fields from a skill position standpoint as a rookie.
What was that about Fields?
Is Richardson going into a worse situation than Fields from a skill position standpoint?
No. I think Pittman's a very underrated NFL receiver that Fields would have killed for last year or his first year. You know what I mean? Just Pittman alone.
Did have Allen Robinson. He wasn't the same. He was
right.
Allen Robinson at his peak, I like better than Pittman, but Pittman now is better than Robinson was at the end of his Bears tenure.
I 100% agree. Not to mention, I think Pierce is adequate. Now that Downs is there, he might move the chains to some degree. You know what I mean?
Man, to be honest with you, though, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, and David Montgomery, without Jonathan Taylor, I still think it might be better than what Richardson has right now.
Maybe. I'm a big Pittman guy, and maybe that's just a little bit of recency bias on Allen Robinson because the last 2 years have been really rough, some of which was his fault, some of it was being in terrible situations. But I guess at that point, they had just given Robinson a huge contract. Like public opinion to him was he's pretty darn good at that point. I mean, they just plucked him from Jacksonville at that stage.
For next week's mailbag, we need listeners to come up with some more interesting bets between my Niners and Matt's Steelers, especially the whole Purdy versus Pickett thing that we've been talking about. We've gotten this one a lot. Mr. Controversy says, what's the bet for Steelers versus Niners? I feel like it's at least loser has to wear the other team's jersey for a week. I think one thing that I know we won't do, Matt, is probably buy a jersey. If we had,
I'm not going to go run out and buy a Purdy jersey just for
if we had a jersey on hand already, then maybe. But I don't think we're going to go out and spend money on a jersey. And to be honest with you, I don't even own a 49ers jersey I could send you.
Yeah, I have an old steel. I mean, I probably have a Lambert jersey upstairs I could send you, or Bettis jersey or something like that. But yeah, steal one for my son.
So
yeah, we can come up with something.
Yeah, let us know what you think there. Purdy versus Pickett, Niners versus Steelers. I don't know what our bet is even going to be yet, but it should be a fun one, week 1. And it was a fun one reading all your questions. Apologies to those we did not get to. Always so many good ones. Appreciate you all out there, all the everydayers. Make sure you are an everydayer. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow. NFC power rankings within the division. Talk to you next time right here, Peacock and Williamson.